Chair of the board, and the representative for the city of San Diego. We welcome the members of the public, the community power staff, and the board members joining us in person today. I will now call the February 22nd regular meeting of the Board of Directors for San Diego Community Power to order. Megan, will you please call the roll?
Director Yamani. Here. Director Parent.
Here.
Director Aguirre. Here. Director Hensey.
Here.
Vice Chair McCann.
Present.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Vice Chair Lufkin-Weimer, Chair Latava.
Present. All right, so we have a quorum. At this moment, why don't we stand, if you're able, to face the flag and open your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we'll do our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that this meeting is taking place in the land of the original inhabitants of the greater San Diego region. A land acknowledgement is a critical step toward working with Native communities to create meaningful partnerships and inclusion in the stewardship and protection of their cultural resources and homelands. And let's take a moment to honor those ancestral grounds that were the traditional lands of the Kumeyaay. Thank you. And this is where we talk about new hires, and we do have a new hire attending her first board meeting. Vera, welcome to San Diego Community Power as our new in-house counsel. Want to say a few words or?
Sure. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I think I was mentioning earlier, this is officially my 3-week anniversary with the SDCP. And it's been I've had a great time so far. The staff has been extremely welcoming and wonderful. And it's been wonderful. My history is I've been an attorney for about 18 years. That entire time has been as an environmental attorney, and about probably 13 years or so was with public agencies, with the air district specifically. So I have a lot of experience with transitioning to zero emission, near zero emission technologies, and generally just transitioning towards a clean energy future. And so I'm very excited to be part of this organization that shares that same mission. Thank you.
Great. We're excited to have you on board. Next, do we have any items to be added, withdrawn, or reordered on the agenda?
We do not.
Next up is non-agenda public comment. It's an opportunity for the public to speak on any items that are not on today's agenda. And I want to note that written public comments submitted before the board meeting were emailed to all directors prior to the board meeting and posted on the website at the beginning of the meeting. Megan, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
There are no hands raised and no public comments received beforehand.
Okay, moving right along, we'll move on to the consent calendar, items 1 through 13. Item 1 is the meeting minutes of January 18th, 2 through 9 is our regular monthly updates from various segments of community power. 10 is a professional services agreement with Chandler Asset Management for financial investment portfolio management services. 11 is the 2024 Community Advisory Committee Work Plan. 12, the Community Clean Energy Grant Program Policy. 13 is approve Ascend Analytics Pilot Extension Agreement for Power Sim Pilot Support Services. So first, are there any directors that would like to pull an item from the consent calendar? Not seeing any. Megan, do we have any public comment on the consent?
We do not.
And with that, I'll turn it back over to the board members for any comments or a motion on the consent items.
Chair, I will be happy to make the motion to approve the consent calendar, items 1 through 13. So moved.
I second that, Mr. Chairman.
And Director Yanani. The only thing I wanted to mention is item 11. I want to thank the Community Advisory Committee for preparing their 2024 work plan. In addition to the regular updates on SDCP activity, the Community Advisory Committee has prioritized assisting staff and helping get the word out on our programs. I'm looking forward to hearing from the CAC during their quarterly report later this evening. Again, thank them for their service. With that, we have a motion by Director McCann, second by Director Yamani. Megan, please call the vote.
Director Yamani, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director Parent, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director Aguirre, how do you vote? Yes. Director Hensy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director McCann, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair LaCava, how do you vote?
Yes.
Motion carries with all directors voting yes.
All right, moving right along to item 14, which is appoint members to the Finance and Risk Management Committee. Having perused the bylaws, actually, when you're appointed for life. Pursuant to the bylaws, I don't know if people realize that, but we are kind and compassionate folks. I understand that Director Parent would like to take leave after his service on the committee.
I don't believe in lifetime appointments.
So with that, I thank him for his service. But I do have a willingness from Director McCann to stay on, Director Aguirre to stay on, and Director Yamani has stepped up to be the third member of the committee. And so that's my recommendations. Do I have a motion to approve those three?
So moved. Second.
Don't be so enthusiastic.
I'm only enthusiastic about Director Jumani's skill and ability.
Okay. With that, we
And the
have.
other two too, I guess.
With that, we have a motion by Director Parent, a second by Director McCann. So Megan, please call the vote.
Director Yamani, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Parent, how do you vote? Director Aguirre, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director Hensy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director McCann, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair LaCava, how do you vote?
Yes.
Motion carries with all directors voting yes.
All right, thank you. Item 15 is approve fiscal year 2023-2024 operating budget amendment. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Washington to present this item.
Thank you, Chair LaCava. I'd like to first start by appreciating Council Member Parent for serving on the Finance and Risk Management Committee, which the finance team leads. So thank you also for your service, and welcome Vice Mayor Yamani to the Finance and Risk Management Committee. We're seeking approval for the amendment to our operating budget for the remainder of fiscal year 23-24. Next slide, please. So very high level, this amendment updates the rate action that took place back in January to include changes in revenue and changes in the expenses, primarily with a focus on the rising cost of energy. So this slide represents the budget development timeline as it's laid out in our budget policy. And you'll note that after the board approves the budget that starts January 1st, mid-year through the fiscal cycle, we pause to do a review of the budget and make recommendations to the board, which brings us to this item today. And this aligns with the rate setting activity historically that we've taken as an agency at San Diego Community College. Next slide, please. So this slide and the following slides focus on a comparative analysis of the board of the budget that was approved by the board and the changes that we are coming forth with in this review and recommendations. So you'll note the change in the net operating revenue, the change in expenses, and then the change in our net position, or said differently, a contribution to our reserves. The next slide, please. So this by the numbers are the changes between those categoric line items. So essentially an increase in revenue that reflects the rate activity that took place on February 1st, and then the rising cost of energy and the change in our net position. Next slide, please. So this graph shows line items differently. So you can see by the line items where the changes took place as we look at the budget that was adopted, and then what we're coming forth with as the amended budget. Next slide, please. So this slide again reflects the changes differently with the changes in the budget compared to what we adopted. So you can see the cost of energy changes, the professional services changes where we identified some cost savings also in personnel, and then the other remaining items categorically in the recommended budget amendment. So with that, Chair, I will conclude my presentation of the budget amendment and turn it back to you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Washington. Megan, do we have any public comment on this side?
We do not.
All right, thank you. I'll now turn it over to board members for any questions, comments, and a motion to approve the operating budget amendment as proposed by staff. Actually, I want to go to you, Director McCann, as Chair of the Finance and Risk Management Committee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The committee, Finance and Budget Committee, went ahead, reviewed this, and we felt this was acceptable doing the amendment and did a unanimous vote in favor of it.
You want to make a motion and support?
And I will make a motion in support unless there's somebody else wants a question. So move for item number 15.
And I'll second.
Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. Thank you, Dr. Washington. I know we expected this because of the great changes that we adopted last month. So thank you for the good work in tracking that and figuring out how we can continue to balance the budget and still have a good positive outcome. So thank you for that good work. So we have a motion by Director McCann and a second by Director Aguirre to move the staff recommendation. Megan, please call the vote.
Director Yamani, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Parent, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Aguirre, how do you vote? Yes. Director Hensy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director McCann, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair LaCava, how do you vote?
Yes.
Motion carries with all directors voting yes.
Right. So we'll move on to item 16, which is a presentation on clean energy prepayment financing. And turn it over again to Dr. Eric Washington to present this item. He'll be accompanied by Michael Berwanger from PFM Advisors. So Dr. Washington?
Thank you, dear Chair. Yes, this is a presentation. We've referred to prepaid PPAs in the past. So this is a presentation that Michael will provide us, just highlighting some of the mechanics and some of the precedent that has been set for these types of transactions. So with that, Michael, I will pass it to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. We can jump right in on the next slide, actually. So what we're talking about at a high level this evening is energy prepayment transaction. The goal of the transaction is to save 8% or more on your existing long-term energy PPAs. How are we going to accomplish this? Will be accomplished through the use of the organization's eligibility to access the tax-exempt bond markets. As a municipal entity, you can take advantage of the tax-exempt bond markets. By way of background, this has been in the U.S. tax code for quite some time. Transactions of this nature have been done since the 90s. There have been a lot of them done. Many of them have been for gas, notably in the Southeast for gas to the home. However, the financial technology that's behind those transactions can be applied to energy transactions. And if we flip to the next slide, over the last few years, many of your peers, 6 other CCAs to date, have now done 11 transactions for close to $10 billion of energy prepayments. You can see them on this slide. I'd note that all of these transactions to date have actually outperformed that 8% savings number. Most of them have been at or near that 10% level. The most recent ones have actually been above 12% in terms of savings. And if we flip to the next slide, I think it's worth, in terms of context, again, the concept has been around for quite some time. It has been widely used in California by other municipally owned utilities, both electric entities as well as gas distribution entities like Long Beach Gas. Since 2006, there have been a number of transactions, as you can see on this slide, for a variety of other folks in the state. I'd note that SMUD, Sacramento Municipal Utility District, has actually done 3 of these already over the last 15 years. I think if we move on, thank you, to the next slide. This, just as we sort of go into the boxology behind this, who's involved. Notably, there's yourselves, you have existing PPA providers. Those are the developers that you've negotiated contracts with through formal processes. You would need an issuer for the bonds. The bonds would be sold through a conduit. To date, everybody has used the California Community Choice Financing Authority that was set up by 4 of your peers for the sole purpose of facilitating energy prepayment transactions by other CCAs. You would need the biggest piece of the puzzle that you would need to procure is a prepaid counterparty. This is typically a financial institution, a bank who has a commodity presence. They're active in the commodity space as well as being a financial institution, so they can take advantage of both aspects of the transaction. And then finally, you'll need obviously, there would be a bond transaction here. You would need investors. Those investors will be buying non-recourse, tax-exempt prepayment bonds. And I'll come back to that. That is different than the debt that you may be familiar with your own organizations, where it's your obligation to repay the debt. On this, if something happens, it's actually not your debt. It's not rated the rating of SDCP when and if SDCP should become rated. It is rated the underlying rating of the bank counterparty. If we flip to the next slide, this is a high-level summary. Admittedly, still a lot of boxes and arrows nonetheless, so please bear with me. The way I like to break down this slide and the transaction is in 2 pieces. So if you focus on the left side of the boxes and arrows, this is really what's happening from an energy perspective. So, if you start with step 1, you have existing PPAs that will be on a limited basis assigned to the counterparty at the top, in that top box. Step 2, that counterparty would be selling those same megawatts to CCCFA. Step 3, CCCFA will then sell those back to San Diego Community Power. So obviously this all happens simultaneously. It's not sequential, but if you think of it, the megawatts start with you, they'll go up to the bank counterparty, and they'll come back to you through the CCCFA. On the right-hand side is what's happening financially. If you start with the issuance, step 5, the CCCFA will sell non-recourse tax-exempt bonds to bond investors. The CCCFA will take those bond proceeds and make a prepayment to that bank counterparty in return for those megawatts that they're getting in step 2. CCCFA will be obligated to pay those bonds as long as the energy is delivered from the counterparty to CCCFA. The final step, really step 7, is that from your perspective, if you started, not that you have contracts that's expensive, but if you started with a contract that was $100, you're now paying $92 to CCCFA, a lot of C's, sorry, realizing that 8% discount. If we flip to the next slide, we've tried for illustration purposes to use some math behind this just to sort of walk through, we get the question, well, where exactly are the savings coming from? If you think of this as the prepayment dollars to the counterparty is capital, they treat it like capital. So if they would normally fund their operations through the sale of bonds, they treat this the same way. They're a taxable entity. Their cost of capital is, let's just for argument's sake, say 5% in this example. It's much higher than yours. You have an existing PPA that on an average annual basis costs you $45 million. That amount would be discounted at that 5% rate. In order to pay for that, what you're selling are tax exempt bonds at a rate of 4.25%. that 75 basis point differential is what results in the savings. So if you were paying $45 million on that PPA before the transaction, you're now effectively paying 40 million after, and CCCFA is paying bond payments of $40 million, generating that $5 million in annual savings. I think it's important to note that when we talk about the savings, everything is net of the cost to put the transaction together. You've got the usual assortment of lawyers and rating agencies and so on and so forth in order to make it happen. The 5 million is net of all that. There's no ongoing cost associated with the transaction once it's put together. Excuse me. We can flip to the next slide. We get a question about this, what's happening with your PPA? What is this limited assignment? What's happening is that you are assigning the energy and the dollars associated with the PPA to that bank counterparty. You are otherwise retaining all of the other rights and remedies that you've negotiated with your chosen PPA counterparty. The dollars and the power go into the financial transaction, but the rest of all of the control over the PPA remains with you. The bank is not stepping into your PPA. You get to retain the control of that PPA. If anything happens with the developer or anything happens with the project, that's still your right to control. That's not being given away, so to speak, here. Again, in return, you'll receive an 8% or higher discount. There would be a need to negotiate this agreement. I would say that because 11 of these transactions have been done to date, many of the counterparties that are active in terms of providing PPAs to the community choice community have already seen this. Every one of them has signed off and agreed to it. There have been no issues. I think the final slide, you just talk about risk and the risk of such a transaction. I think I won't go through every one of these, but if you can think of what might happen with a transaction of this nature, it has been anticipated. There are provisions built into the agreements to deal with the variability of the nature of the energy being produced by the PPAs. But the most notable risk feature of the transaction is that take and pay structure, meaning it's very similar to the PPA that exists today. If you receive energy, you pay for it. That continues. There's no change there. If you receive the energy, you pay for it. If you don't receive it, you're not paying for it. The bonds that are sold will be rated the same rating as that bank counterparty, because if something happens and the transaction unwinds, the bondholders will be made whole through the CCCFA, who is looking to the bank counterparty, who is obligated to make a termination payment to the CCCFA. That obligation is the security for the debt. It's why it's rated the bank counterparty's rating. The bondholders do not have recourse to San Diego Community Power or any of the members of San Diego Community Power. Thus, the bonds are not treated like debt of San Diego. It is not taken into account in terms of any potential rating agency treatment, so on and so forth. I think that is probably the most notable risk feature of the transaction. So when we say what's most likely the key risk, if something, if the worst happens, it would be that your expected savings of $5 million a year are gone. You're not, and you're back to square one. Your PPA has come back to you, but you're not otherwise obligated beyond that. So there's some cost in terms of time and energy to put this together. There's lost savings. Both of those are material, but there's no obligation to repay the debt. I think with that, Eric, I'll stop. I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Michael. So Chair and Directors, that concludes the presentation. I'll turn it back over to you, Chair.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Megan, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
This is receive and file, so no motion will be required. I'll turn it over to the board members for any questions or comments you might have. Yes, Director Hensy.
So it's exceedingly complex financially, but I think that I appreciate you going over the benefits and the risks, Mike, because if you hadn't gone over the risks, it might have sounded too good to be true. But I think that knowing that so many other CCAs have found such high savings by going forward with the prepayment makes me think that this is the right decision for us. And I'm glad that we have the opportunity.
Thank you. Any other, Director Parent?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate something I said at our FRMC meeting. I think it's really good that we're, I mean, I support this. This makes sense. I think it's good that staff is looking at ways to utilize our unique situation as a public entity in this, to be able to take advantage of financing structures that are available to us that might not be available to private sector competitors. And I think it's just, we should be working every advantage to procure energy in a cost effective way to have lower rates for our ratepayers. And I'm glad we're utilizing every tool in the toolkit to be able to accomplish that. So thanks for the efforts on this, and I look forward to supporting the item.
I'll ask, not seeing any other directors, I'll ask a couple of questions. So I'll also thank you for bringing this forward. And as the director said, thank you for your looking at new and innovative ways to bring it, and actually not so innovative because this has clearly been time tested. What do we expect going forward? Would every PPA go through this mechanism or only select ones?
So we would probably have multiple transactions in terms of which PPAs go in. Those will typically point to the long-term PPAs. And then it would be a matter of selecting which ones make the most sense to put into what I refer to as a portfolio of PPAs into these types of transactions.
Okay. And just to ask the question, which I think you included in your presentation, that everything else that we're obligated to do, that meeting the CPUC requirements, this doesn't have any effect on that. This is just our internal financing mechanism.
Yeah, no, Mike jump in here at any time, but as Mike pointed out, that all the mechanics of the actual PPA would remain intact, and that would include the requirements from the CPUC in terms of our portfolio.
Okay. And then the last question I'll ask is, with this, when you decide to move forward on this, whether it's with one PPA or a portfolio, it would come back to the board for review and approval?
Yes, there would be a bouquet of documents and agreements that would need to be executed. So those would come to the board for approval.
Okay, great. Again, thank you both for the presentation, and to staff for the very good work on this. Not seeing any other comments from the directors. This is just a receive and file information item. Thank you again for joining us at the board meeting this evening. So we'll move on to item 17, which is the quarterly report on the Community Advisory Committee. And I'll turn it over to CEO Crespo to present this item. Or not. We'll just go direct.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matthew Vasilakis, Chair of the Community Advisory Committee and CAC member representing the City of San Diego. Over the last 8 months as chair, the CAC has continued building community support and engagement of SDCP by centering the needs of our communities when collaborating with SDCP staff in the development of our customer offerings. At the November regular meeting of the Board of Directors, I presented a summary of CAC activities from July through October. This report today summarizes activities that took place November through January. So let's begin. Over the last quarter, the CAC has continued to improve its operations by establishing clear protocols to better prepare CAC members to serve during meetings and more clearly outline our roles and responsibilities. Thank you, CO. Specifically, the addition of the consent calendar to agendas has allowed members to remain informed about key SDCP initiatives while streamlining meetings and better focusing the discussion of regular agenda items. CAC members, staff, and legal counsel work to update key operational documents such as revising the CAC scope of work to include an equity overview, expanding on sections of our standing operating procedures, which are now board adopted, thank you. Policies and procedures to continue developing the committee, and unanimously recommending the board approval of the conflict of interest and ethical conduct policy. The CAC also leveraged one of its ad hoc committees to recently update our fiscal 2023 or 2022-2023 work plan, which has been approved, thank you, and included in your agenda package. Of note, the 2024 CAC work plan clarifies strategies under each focus to better track progress and outcomes, defines information sharing protocols to activate member advocacy, and adds civic engagement and participation as an area of focus to create ways to increase participation at CAC meetings, leverage CAC member networks, and foster CAC member turnover resiliency. Next, know that our ad hoc committees have been a key opportunity for CAC members to discuss and provide feedback to staff on several topics prior to having full CAC discussions at regular meetings. In January, the programs and community and equity ad hoc committees came to an end. Over the last 6 months, those volunteers discussed topics ranging from the Regional Energy Network to outreach and volunteering opportunities. Last month, the CAC stood up 2 new committees. The Community Grants Ad Hoc Committee was created to provide feedback on criteria proposed for SDCP's next round of community grant programs. And the Power 100 Ad Hoc Committee will discuss strategies to support businesses and community-based organizations in opting up to Power 100. Lastly, but certainly not least, in December, CAC welcomed Ilian Sandoval as a new CAC member representing Imperial Beach, and sadly had to say goodbye to former member Carolyn Schofield from Chula Vista. On that note, as of today, the CAC has 2 vacancies representing the County of San Diego and the City of Chula Vista. We continue to work with staff to advertise the vacancies at meetings, community events, and through SDCP's social media. This will be particularly important at the end of the fiscal year when several members will be timing out, and we will need to support the board in filling vacancies specifically for the City of San Diego, Encinitas, and Imperial Beach. Thank you. And on behalf of the CAC, we all look forward to working with you to continue to advise the board on key issues affecting our communities. This concludes the quarterly CAC report, and I'm happy to answer any questions, if any.
All right, thank you, Matthew, for the report, and thank you for your leadership as chairing the CAC. Megan, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
All right. This is a receiving file, so we don't need a motion, but I'll turn it over to the board for any questions or comments. Not seeing any, they're so happy with that. I'll make a couple since I'm the veteran here with like 1 year more of service than the rest of you. When I first came on board, we weren't quite sure what to do with the Community Advisory Committee. It was part of the original formation. I remember working with the CAC to get regular reports from the CAC. And I really want to appreciate Community Power staff for all the working time you invest in the CAC to really help them to be I'll use the word with no disrespect, into a more professional organization, briefing them, helping them structure their agendas, creating a work plan that goes above and beyond just reviewing items that ultimately will come to the board. So I think this is really what we had imagined the Community Advisory Committee could be. And with your leadership, Matthew, and everybody else on the committee, I think it really is fulfilling that role. So thank you, and please extend our thanks to the rest of the committee members.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right, not seeing any other comment by the board. We will receive and file that and move on to item 18, which is approve load management standards compliance plan. And I believe I'll be turning it over to Aaron Liu and Stephen Gunther to present this item. So when you're ready, gentlemen.
Chair and Board, my name's Stephen Gunther. I'm Senior Regulatory Analyst at SDCP, and I'll be kicking off this presentation with a little bit of background. So, next slide. So, like I said, I'm just gonna tee up what the load management standards are. They've been around since the 1970s. The California Energy Commission has held authority over these standards, which focus on strategies to shape electricity load. So when people are using their electricity. Last April, the CEC amended the existing load management standards, adding several new requirements for utilities and large CCAs, which SDCP is. The updated standards mostly focus on rates and price signals as a way to encourage customers to shift their energy usage. Next slide. So more specifically, the amended standards require utilities and CCAs to develop time-dependent rates that change at least hourly, as well as a list of load flexibility programs, and then take these, the rates and programs to the board for approval. They also require all time-dependent rates be maintained in a new statewide database. And lastly, they require conduct public outreach and education to customers about these new load flexibility strategies. Slide, please. So the LMS amendments also require that utilities and CCAs develop a compliance plan that outlines how we intend to meet the goals of the updated standards. The deadline for seeking board approval of the compliance plan is April 1st. And that's the draft plan in your board packet tonight, and what Aaron will be speaking to in more detail in just a second. The other load management standards deadlines are outlined here, including the list of cost-effective load flexibility programs in October later this year. Submitting dynamic rates to our board in July of 2025, and then offering such a rate by July 2027. So the compliance plans must evaluate each of these requirements and timelines based on cost effectiveness. You could stay on the previous slide. We're requiring, or the compliance plan is to evaluate each of these timelines, the deadlines, and requirements based on cost effectiveness, technological feasibility, and equity. And CCAs or utilities have the ability to delay or modify compliance based on that evaluation. And that is what our compliance plan does and what Aaron will speak to now.
Thank you, Stephen. Good evening, Board of Directors. My name is Aaron Liu, Senior Rates and Strategy Analyst. I'm going to talk a bit more about the details of our compliance plan as well as our roadmap on how to meet the load management standards requirements. So it's really two tracks that are highlighted in our compliance plan. One part is all the great initiatives that are already underway and ongoing to support the goals of the load management standards, such as increasing reliability, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, as well as lowering customer costs. So all these great items on the left side of the slide are already in progress and ongoing, such as the community energy grant that was mentioned earlier, our 100% renewable energy policy, time-dependent rates, as well as continued customer education and outreach. So in terms of what's being planned in the roadmap to tackle two of the largest requirements of the load management standards are the dynamic rates as well as cost-effective load flexibility programs. So in terms of dynamic rates, we are really looking at and evaluating results and data of dynamic rate pilots that are ongoing. So specific to the SDG&E territory, those pilots have been delayed, but dynamic rate pilots are ongoing in other parts of California. So we want to evaluate those results to take a look at customer impacts, customer acceptance, as well as cost effectiveness. In terms of the load flexibility programs, including distributed systems, paired and solar and storage system, those are underway. They've been presented to this board before and they are ongoing. So those programs are being designed and will be implemented. And once those program results come in, we will also evaluate them for cost effectiveness. And really, it's an ongoing iterative process. We'll evaluate and rate and program designs to make sure they make sense to us. And we'll highlight those in the next update of the plan. So in terms of next steps, this compliance plan is included in the packet for review and approval. And once the plan is approved, it will be submitted to the Energy Commission before April 1st, 2024. The Energy Commission also requires submission of annual reports to demonstrate implementation of the plan starting next year. And the plan must also be reviewed at least once every 3 years and updates submitted if there is material. That concludes our presentation. Happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you both for the presentation. Megan, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
So the staff is seeking approval. I'll turn it over to the board members, questions, comments, and we need a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve.
All right, Director Yamani.
I will second that.
So just a couple of quick questions. One, thank you for the good work. It seems like every day there's a new requirement we have to step up and meet, and I appreciate staff on that. Did I hear correctly that SDG&E is running a pilot program on dynamic pricing, but doesn't have the results of that yet?
Pilot has been delayed.
Delayed, okay. But you have other pilot programs?
Are ongoing in the PG&E.
Okay. Okay, I don't have any other questions. Again, thank you for your good work. So we have a motion by Director Yamani to approve the staff recommendation, a second by Director McCann. Megan, please call the vote.
Director Yamani, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Parent, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Aguirre, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director Hinzy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director McCann, how do you vote?
Aye.
Vice Chair Lawson Reamer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair LaCava, how do you vote?
Yes.
Motion carries with all directors voting yes.
All right, thank you. And again, thank you to staff for your good work.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 19, which is an update on regional grid development. And we'll turn it over to Patrick Welch to present this item.
Thanks, Chair and board members. Patrick Welch, Senior Manager of Legislation, here with my colleague Stephen, staying up here.
Is there a mic on?
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Better?
Yeah.
I'll reintroduce myself. Good evening, board chair members. My name is Patrick Welch, Senior Legislative Manager. Happy to be here with you today. We'll be providing an informational update on regional grid developments, which is an important policy discussion happening in California. And we'll turn it over to Stephen to get us started with the presentation.
Thank you, Patrick. Hello again, board. Again, Stephen Gunther, Senior Regulatory Analyst, stepping in my role tonight of providing background and context. So currently the Western US has 38 balancing authority areas, each with their own grid operator that maintains their own market rules, resource adequacy requirements, as well as responsible for the transmission planning process in their territory. To the right, you can see the various balancing authorities across the West, including the California Independent System Operator, which is the ISO that we operate under. The idea of regionalization is to better coordinate across grid operators and territories to create efficiencies with the hope of lowering costs and increasing reliability. And it's important to note that this can take many forms of governance structures, and there isn't a one size fits all when we're talking about regionalization. Next slide, please. So California is already physically connected to a wider grid and has already taken some steps to increase the regional coordination. The California Independent System Operator, or CAISO, operates the Western Energy Imbalance Market that allows power to be traded across the West in real time. And this has resulted in significant cost savings and GHG reductions since 2015. CAISO is also looking to build upon this coordination through the extended day ahead market, but only one entity outside of California has currently expressed interest. And it's also important to note that CAISO is uniquely tied to California politics. Its 5-member board is appointed by the governor and approved by the Senate. So even though they're currently operating these regional markets, it's very tied to California governance in its current form. Next slide, please. So why is this being debated? There's a shared clean energy vision across most Western states. So it makes sense that states should coordinate better to successfully meet these clean energy goals. There's also been significant retirement and planned retirement of firm energy resources, namely fossil fuel power plants, which are being replaced by clean variable resources like solar and wind. So a wider regional market will help make better use of those resources. There's difference when the sun is shining in California or when the wind is blowing in Idaho. So having greater transactability across these regions will help create those efficiencies and make sure we're using that electricity when it's available. And similarly, this ability to lean on neighbors will be important as peak energy use grows and changes. And lastly, there's a timing element to why this is being debated now. There is a competing regional grid vision for the West. Currently the Southwest Power Pool, which is based in Arkansas, is in discussion with Western utilities and grid operators about joining. Therefore, it's putting a little more pressure on California to move forward with an alternative regional vision. And with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick.
So what are some of the potential benefits of a more robust regionalization? The first one I think is most important to SDCP is energy resource cost savings. We know that our business here is delivering renewable power to our customers. And that's where the majority of our budget is going to. The idea of having a wider footprint, a shared market, is going to give potentially SDCP access to a greater pool of resources that could reduce costs over time. This has been pretty well studied. EIM, which Stephen covered, is about 5% of energy transactions today, and it's already netted California ratepayers a savings of $862 million. Studies have shown that a more broad market that captures more transactions could continue to save 6 to 8 to 12% of power resource costs over time. Secondly, really important as well is enhanced reliability. We know we're experiencing more extreme weather. We know that the energy demand will grow, as Stephen mentioned. And so we need to be able to share power with folks in other parts of the Western US more easily. When it's not sunny here, it may be sunny elsewhere. We want them to send us our solar power. We want to be able to send them our solar power when we have more than we need. Also, all this efficiencies will lead to greater emission reductions and lead to a better integration of renewables on the grid. And then finally, right now, we kind of have balkanized transmission planning. If we're all working together across the West, we can better plan transmission, and that leads to more efficiencies and cost savings as well. Next slide, please. There are some concerns related to transmission. There is a situation, depending upon what type of regional structure ultimately moves forward, where California customers could be paying for transmission that doesn't actually terminate in California. That is something that's on the SDG&E side of the bill. It's not a direct cost on the SDCP side of the bill, but it is something to be aware of. We can't predict how that will ultimately shake out. That would be a debate farther down the line on cost allocation. In partnering with other states, some have had concerns that the federal government could intervene, in particular under certain administrations who may have views contrary to California on clean energy policy. We lived through an administration that did have a policy contrary to California policy, or a vision contrary to California policy, and our energy policies, which are already regulated by the federal government because their wholesale transactions withstood that, and the Western energy imbalance market withstood that. So I think the understanding now is that there is minimal risk, but there is always that risk that someone could raise an issue at the federal level on this. And finally, probably the biggest issue that has really been part of this discussion and debate is impact to state jobs. Right now, California has the RPS standard, which attaches building renewables for the 60% build out we have to go through by 2030 to balancing authority areas. So most projects have to be built within the ISO. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's kind of the foundational element. Part of the discussion is, should the ISO boundaries still exist as they are today? If they don't exist, then that means the RPS gets a larger footprint, and that means more projects could be built in other states. And some entities have expressed concerns that that could undo California's progress in not only clean energy, but a commitment to clean energy jobs. SDCP staff, myself, and our team members from our public affairs team have had some really productive conversations on this with IABW 569, our local chapter. We think that moving forward, we can land in a really good place with them on this issue and discussions. I think there is a way where we can achieve a regional grid while still protecting in-state jobs. And we've also noted for them too that any type of movement forward to a regional grid would not impact already adopted policies by the board here at SDC. Next slide, please. So we're getting to the end of it. Just want to mention where this is being debated and why this is also important and relevant now. There have been 2 bills on this in the past 5 years. Both have failed largely due to concerns about job loss. So what has happened as a result of the failure of those 2 bills is they've commissioned 2 studies to look at the pros and cons. And they've also kicked off what's called the West-Wide Pathways Initiative that is being led by the Vice Chair of the Energy Commission and the President of the Public Utilities Commission, and involves stakeholders from around the West. They are anticipating that they will put out what's called a straw proposal next month about the best form of a regional market. Stakeholders will have the opportunity to comment. The idea is that there could be changes that could be made to governance structures in these balancing authorities that doesn't require a change in the law, but depending upon what their straw proposal is and how it's received by the public, that could trigger needed legislation in 2025 for California to make this happen. Next slide, please. Status of the pathways process. This is moving pretty quickly. Again, like I said, March would be a straw proposal, and they could tee up a full presentation of that sometime in April for adoption. And then that could kick off a legislative discussion as well. That would be considered phase 2. Next slide, please. And finally, a number of our CCA colleagues have already adopted positions on this. Cal CCA, Trade Association of Community Choice Aggregators, has adopted a supportive position. Bring Clean Energy and Clean Power Alliance have as well. Our next steps is we hope to come back to you at the next board meeting with some language that we can adopt to our standing policy platform so that SDCP can be more fully engaged in the debate. And I'll end with just saying that that's why at a staff level, we're really interested in this. This discussion represents probably a foundational shift to how energy markets operate in California and the West. And we'd like to be involved in the discussion on behalf of our customers so that we can have the voice in the room and have our thoughts heard to make sure that we're bringing the perspective of our community. So with that wraps up our presentation, and would be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you for the presentation. Another complex, but I appreciate the detail you went into. So like first, Megan, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Thank you. This is a receive and file. No motion is required. So I'll turn it over to the board for any comments or questions on this. So, Vice Chair.
Sure. No, I wanted to thank the team for your engagement with stakeholders. Sorry. I want to thank the team for your thoughtful engagement with stakeholders. I know this is really challenging, and I appreciate the work doing the outreach ahead of time before we get sideways with folks. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Director Hensey.
So it sounds really early on, but just thinking about the governance structure, I think we all formed here because we wanted more accountability and more transparency for our customers. So I see there's some paragraphs describing that governance structure, but how would we maintain those principles if we're moving towards a more regionalized form of operating?
Yeah, I think that's a key, and Stephen, feel free to jump in. I think that's a key part of the discussion is how do you maintain access to a market? How do you shape a market for energy transactions that is fair and that is accessible and that the decision-making process is really clear? Typically in other markets around the West that have a more regional scale, they have stakeholder committees that are put into the governance structure. So there might be a committee of states, or there might be stakeholder committees based on the type of sector that they're in. And so that would be part of the discussion. And it's not clear also if the current governance structure of the ISO, where it's appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate, it's not clear that that would ever change. That's certainly part of the discussion, but it's not clear that there's an appetite to actually change that at this point.
Thank you.
And I'll just add to quickly clarify that I don't believe anything in the discussion of regionalization would supersede SDCP's local commitments or any of our structures, just widening the market that we can participate in. But you know, we're still a fully autonomous CCA and can make those decisions now. We just have a wider market to make them.
All right. Not seeing any comments by my colleagues. I'll ask a couple of questions. Consent item 9, which was the update on regulatory and legislative affairs, mentions the Big Wires Act, federal legislation introduced by Congressman Scott Peters. Is there an intersection between what we're talking here and the Big Wires Act? Should that pass?
Yeah, that bill has to do with interregional dispatch of transmission capacity. So you have to be able to basically 30% of your system load has to be able to go to the next balancing authority area. So it's pretty related. So right now, if that bill were to pass, ISO as a balancing authority area would have that obligation. If there is a new regional entity, depending upon what it looks like that California is part of, and that bill were to pass, that regional entity would have that transfer obligation. I would note from a policy perspective, it probably makes that type of bill maybe less needed because you have a bigger footprint and all the transmission may be embedded into your bigger footprint as it is today. So they're definitely related, and one would have to give and take potentially and have both discussions shape out.
Okay. And then trying to wrap my head around the technical details. So one of the things we hear about when we're looking at energy contracts are power generators that don't actually have authority to connect to the grid. And we make our contracting conditioned on their ability. Does this resolve that? Does that make it easier for them to connect?
The answer is complicated. Theoretically, yes. That is one of the shared things, that there would be shared rules potentially for California and other of the Western states that would decide to join this larger regional entity, that there would be what are called interconnection rules that are agreed to. It would be an opportunity to improve them at that point. Right now, the ISO is really backlogged. I think I just heard a presentation that they have something like 500 projects in their queue, which is a record. So I would hope so, but that is a detail that would need to be sorted out and would depend upon what rules are ultimately agreed to in a Western market.
Okay, I meant some of that related to the infrastructure, so it's not just a regulatory thing. I want to echo the Vice Chair's comment about talking to all stakeholders and getting an understanding and only bringing this to us as an information item. But I think I want to emphasize or ask a question to emphasize, I think the last point you made, this is moving with or without our participation. And so really the question is, do we take a position? Do we do our heavy lifting to help shape this so that we meet, as Director Hinsey said, really preserve the reason we created a CCA in the first place, and shape this to maximize what we're trying to achieve while trying to think bigger about the bigger picture that's going on. So, but this looks like this is happening. And as the art, let me just leave it there. This is
I
happening.
think you're right. And I think the point that Stephen made about SPP, the Southwest Power Pool out of Arkansas, that is a real threat. They are in talks with utilities and balancing authorities that we trade with today. So like Bonneville Power Administration has 10,000 megawatts of hydro up in the Pacific Northwest. Bonneville is actually paying to fund what's called the phase 1 study of SPP's Market Plus initiative. So it's likely that Bonneville could take their transmission and their hydro and put it in that other market. That would create a lot of inefficiencies for us in achieving our clean energy goals here. So there are a lot of things happening. So it is really important that every stakeholder possible in California is engaged in these discussions.
All right. And then to close, do you expect to come back to us next month with a specific proposal?
Yeah, that's our hope. We intended to provide some information to give you time to think about it, provide an opportunity to ask questions and follow up, and then come with some high level principles that would allow us to engage in the conversation.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you both again for your good work on this. Then we'll move on to item 20, which is approval of a pilot project agreement with Grid Alternatives. We'll turn it over to Colin and Colin.
Thank you, Chair LaCava. And I have to say, I'm up here presenting the good work of Nelson Lamelli, who's at home sick right now. But I'm Colin Santilli, Director of Programs for SDCP. And we're here today to ask for your approval of the pilot project agreement with Grid Alternatives to roof replacements and repairs in connection with the Disadvantaged Community Single Family Homes Solar Program. Next slide. So I'll spend just a second talking about what that mouthful is, the DAC-SASH program, because this is really a pilot that helps get homes ready for that program. It's a statewide program funded by the CPUC and implemented statewide by Grid. And the program allows or provides nearly no cost installation of solar to low-income single-family homeowners who live in disadvantaged communities as defined by the coronavirus Green tool. We have, as you can see here in the chart, pretty shockingly low participation in the SDG&E territory in this program. There's a number of reasons for that we spent a different time talking about, but we identified this early. We were looking at pilot project concepts across our territory. We identified this lack of participation, something we wanted to focus on. Next slide. So among other reasons, one of the reasons we've identified where is holding up participation in the program is that, not surprisingly, some of the homes that are older don't have the ability to house a new solar system on top. And so for the eligibility of the program being a low-income single-family homeowner, if you don't have the resources to upgrade that roof, you can't take part in this program. So as a result, we proposed this pilot back in the concept phase back in June of last year when we were thinking about concepts, and we've carried that thought through to bring forth an agreement to partner with Grid to implement the pilot to approximately 25 homes. Next slide. So the eligibility for this pilot will nearly mirror the eligibility for that DAC-SASH program. So that includes owning and occupying a single family home as a primary residence, again, being located in a disadvantaged community as defined by the coronavirus Green tool. And then the total income out of the household must not be more than the income limits of the CARE FAIR programs. It's very targeted, very narrow group of our customers that we're looking to support here. And then additionally, you do need to be an active SDCP customer or re-enroll in the service. And then, of course, the end goal here is to get you signed up for that DAC-SASH program. Next slide. So Grid, as our partner in this, I mentioned, the statewide implementer of DAC-SASH. They are uniquely positioned to implement this pilot. They're already engaging with the homeowners for the solar. And so to minimize burden on those homeowners and to minimize the cost associated, they're, again, uniquely positioned to implement the pilot. If approved, they would identify and outreach eligible homes. They would enroll them in the pilot and the DAC-SASH program using several licensed roofing companies to complete the repair work on the roofs. And there's a note also, we're targeting outreach toward homes that are located within the Transformative Climate Communities project area. This was a project that was awarded by the Strategic Growth Council earlier this year, focused on the Logan Heights and Barton Logan area. And there's a number of projects, one of which is called a Healthy Homes Project, which looks to do a complete renovation on 25 homes in that area. So ideally, we will be identifying homes in conjunction with that project. So we have a total pilot budget of $550,000, $50,000 for the administration for grid, and the remaining would go not to exceed that amount for incentives. We wrote here, enable at least 25 homes. Part of this is really a learning for us to understand. We have some estimates on roof repair prices, but we want to get that actual data. And like all of our pilots, we're hoping to get this information and turn it into additional funding, external funding. We can expand the work, not only from our ratepayers funds, but externally as well. So if approved, we would work with Grid to finalize the agreement and get to work quickly here in February. They would start identifying homes in the spring, and then the rollout of the roof repairs would likely commence shortly thereafter. And that is what I have for you today.
All right, thank you, Colin. Appreciate you filling in. I think you did a good job. Wish the best for Nelson. Megan, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
All right. So we are looking for a motion on this one. Comments? Fast.
I'll be the second.
Okay, we have a motion by Director McCann and a second by our Vice Chair. Did you have a question?
I want to just make a couple comments.
Okay, go ahead. That's what you talk.
Well, I'm just really excited. This is a great news item. I wish we could do more than 25. So I think, you know, I guess I do have a question. How could we do more?
Well, the pilot budget was approved this fiscal year, and we have limited funds to spread across as many pilots as we can. So in future budget years, the organization could choose to expand this program this pilot into a full program. At the same time, like I mentioned, we're looking externally for funding actively. You all approved our submission of the REN business plan to the CPUC. That's an energy efficiency program, but we're actively looking at other possible funding. And between state agencies and the federal government, the enabling more distributed energy resources is a priority of many agencies. So lessons from this pilot where we can get as many rooftop solar systems installed that we think is going to be prime for external funding.
And about what's the cost per roof?
It varies, but the estimate we're going in is that we don't expect it to exceed $20,000 per roof. But that's the whole purpose of the pilot. We'll gather that data. We'll have a nice report out, and ideally it would cost less than that. But I think from what we've heard from Grid and other folks as we were researching the pilot, it tends to be more than we think, and so we'll have the data to really be able to prove that after the pilot.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Sure. Pleasure.
We'll go to Director McCann, and then we'll go down the lines.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you very much for this. This is an exciting program, and I appreciate you identifying what the obstacles were and being able to do that, because you would think that free solar panels in an area which really needs some energy efficiency and some cost savings people would be looking to do that. But understanding that the roofs may not be able to handle the solar panels, need to be upgraded, other things, I really appreciate that. So I'm obviously a huge advocate for solar panels, and I wanted to thank you for making this happen. Thank you.
Director Hensey,
Yeah. So yeah, this is really exciting, and I think it also presents a good opportunity for local roofers to get this work. Are we putting any thought into how we'll be selecting the contractors to do it? And if there's a way to have local people working on local routes, that seems ideal, right?
Yes, this being a pilot project, we've working with Grid, they'll be choosing the roofers, they'll be running the full administration. If we were to grow this into a full program that went beyond 25 homes, we would have kind of a longer process where we likely would hire or go through a process, we would select the roofers ourselves. One of the reasons why I think Grid was selected for the statewide program, and one of the reasons why we think they're such a good partner is they do have a focus on workforce development and creating local jobs. And that is one of the tenets of their organization. So we won't be involved in selecting the roofers, but were this to grow, we would take that as a priority as well.
Great, thank you.
and Director Aguirre.
Thank you, Chair. I would love to see this grow. I think it's great that you've identified this as a need because something so basic, right? for working families, that for somebody else, it might be nothing, 20,000, but for working families, it's a small fortune. So I really appreciate you thinking outside the box and identifying this need and creating this pilot project. And I would love to see it grow. So thank you. And that's a great point that you made also, Director, about the local workforce. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I guess the only other question I'll add is with 2025, how will we identify those?
Grid Alternatives has some homes that they've been working with through the DAC program. They're pretty active in trying to, you saw those numbers. We're very behind compared to other IOU territories. And they have a list of homes that they've been working with that they've identified meet certain criteria with the exception of those roofs. So I think it's not going to be a matter of how we're going to find those homes. I think we're going to, they may have a backlog already of homes that are available. And then again, that aspect of the kind of recruitment into the program also falls on Grid as the administrator.
Okay. Well, I'll echo the comments of my colleagues about, I have no doubt this is going to be successful. And the question will be, how do we scale it up? In both the solar component as well as the roof replacement for those who might need it. And I think about the homes that were damaged during the floods this winter. And they may not be quite ready to take advantage of something like this as they rebuild their homes. But it's something to keep in mind. But when do you think you'll be back with us with a report?
It all depends on how fast the homes are identified and the installations installed. So I think we're anticipating 9 months, but
okay, all right, sounds good. Okay, again, I think great a bit of excitement here. So we have a motion by Director McCann, a second by the Vice Chair. Megan, please call the vote.
Director Imani, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Parent, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Aguirre, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director Hingy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director McCann, how do you vote?
Aye.
Vice Chair Lawson Reamer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair LaCava, how do you vote?
Yes.
Motion carries with all directors voting yes.
Okay, we have one last item on the action agenda. This is item 21, which is to approve the Nobel Solar LLC power purchase agreement. I'll turn over to Carly and Andrea.
Good evening, Board and Chair. So we're going to present to you the Noble Solar Project, which is coined the Purple Sage Energy Center. It's the last project we were proposing to execute that came to us in the latter part of 2022 via our RFP for long-term renewable projects. And we are very excited about the project's products and terms. Next slide, please. As SDCP procures to meet 75% renewables by 2027 and 100% by 2035, this project contributes to those goals in addition to delivering supply cost certainty. Purple Sage will provide midterm reliability compliant resource adequacy that will begin in 2027. Next slide, please. So this project is sited in Pahrump, Nevada, which is in Clark County, and it is also connected to the California ISO. Next slide, please. Purple Sage is typical of agreements that we have executed recently, and that we are entitled to all of the attributes from the facility, including renewable energy, capacity, and ancillaries. And in the event that there are misdevelopment milestones, SDCP will be financially compensated. Yep. I'd like to reiterate the midterm reliability contribution and how excited we are about the project and its terms. And also pointing out Primergy, who is the developer for Noble Solar. They are aiming for a low impact approach, limiting landscape and vegetation disturbance. And Primergy has actually been recognized as best in class for their approach to sustainable development in the Desert Southwest region. The project will create a great number of construction jobs, and they will cooperate with labor. And for the term of this project, the power purchase agreement will contribute the developer will contribute $100,000 per year to benefit the SDCP communities. So that concludes our presentation. We'd like permission to execute this contract, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right.
Just
Thank
go
you.
back one slide.
Yeah.
Just go back one slide.
Oh, one slide. Okay.
All that and I'll get public comment, but I'm sure there is none. Is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
All right, Vice Chair.
Yes.
This is great. Sorry, I just wanted to read it and.
No.
I'm really excited. I think you all just really did the work to try to make sure that our projects, our renewable energy projects are creating good jobs for working families here in San Diego County, and I'm just really impressed. So thanks.
You're welcome.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
I will second it.
Yeah, I'll go to Director Aguirre.
Thank you, Chair. I want to echo that the agreement is really great and I appreciate all of your work to make it happen. I did bring this up during the briefing and I have a suggestion for moving forward as we execute these contracts and we create the fund and we put some money towards it. I would love for us to have a broader discussion on how those funds will be distributed among our customers. So going beyond maybe Cal Bioscreen and developing our own criteria and policy that is specific to our region and to our customers. Thank you.
Great suggestion. Did you want to comment on that? Come on.
Happy to. Yep. I'll try to cover one part of it, and that is that we don't typically use the Cal screen as a criteria for distributing any funding. The pilot project I just presented was specifically to enable participation in that one state program that used that. So we don't have any intention to use that. For our community grant program, those are that we're going to launch next week. Those programs are open to anyone in our territory and CBOs who are serving our customers. So there is a potential for these funds to be incorporated into future grant programs. I think we'd be looking for the least administratively burdensome way to incorporate these funds and get them out in the community, but they wouldn't necessarily have to get fed into the grant program, but that could be one option.
Thank you. And I know that it's just, I wouldn't want us to just rely on one single tool. If that's something that we consider in the future, I think that's okay, but I would like for us to develop our own set of criteria and policy. Not that what we've been doing so far isn't, but I think we could have a broader discussion. Thank you.
That's good. Okay, thank you, Director Aguirre, for your point. Any other comments by my colleague? Thank you, staff, for the great work on pulling this together. Obviously, it took a little bit longer on this one, but it was well worth the effort. This is an extraordinary contribution to our portfolio. So thank you for that very good work and appreciate, as my colleague said, the connection with organized labor, where these projects are, and the challenge we have about local jobs, but at least they're getting to the right workforce. So with that, we do have a motion by the Vice Chair and a second by Director McCann. Megan, please call the vote.
Director Yamani, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Parent, how do you vote?
Aye.
Director Aguirre, how do you vote? Yes. Director Hensy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Director McCann, how do you vote?
Aye.
Vice Chair Lawson-Remer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair LaCava, how do you vote?
Yes.
Motion carries with all directors voting yes.
All right, with that, we've gotten ourselves through the work agenda. We'll go to reports. As some of you may have noticed, our Chief Executive Officer is not here, but we do have Dr. Washington to give us a report.
Thank you, Chair. Again, thank you, directors, for your time and commitment and support to San Diego Community Power. San Diego Community Power, through the work of our community engagement team, is doing great work bringing SDCP into the community and connecting with the customers that we serve. In addition to our ongoing residential customer outreach, SDCP also had a chance to connect with some of our local businesses, including the strategic partnership team being on hand to celebrate with Power 100 champion San Diego North Business Chamber at the ribbon cutting ceremony of their new office space. On Thursday, February 8th, I was able to join our public affairs team and Power 100 partners from James Gang Printing, La Jolla Country Day School, and the San Diego Way at the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce annual dinner. Karen, our chief executive, along with our team, were also able to join with our director Yamani at the National City Chambers installation dinner on February 9th. This week, Karen, along with Byron Vosberg, were also in Sacramento, along with some of our regulatory and legislative team members attending Lobby Day with Cal CCA, our industry trade association. So that concludes the report on Karen's behalf to the board. Thank you again, directors. Thank you to staff. Thank you to the public for being with us tonight. And that concludes the updates. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Dr. Washington. Does our general counsel have anything to report?
No, I do not have anything specific to report. Then again, I am happy to be here. I do hope to connect more directly with each of you individually. And if there are any questions or anything that you would like to ask me, I'd like to have a good practice of communicating more directly with each of you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And then any director comments, anything that your municipality is doing? Not seeing any? Well, that brings us to the end of our agenda. I appreciate everyone's participation today. We are adjourned until the next regular meeting of the Board of Directors of San Diego Community Power on March 28th, 2024. We are adjourned.
Thank you.